She unblocked my number after 5 days of complete silence. 5 days of unanswered calls and unopened messages, all because I refused to fund her extravagant wedding, the kind of wedding that could bankrupt a small country. Her name flashed on my phone screen. Emma. The same Emma who had demanded a $70,000 ceremony with every luxury imaginable, insisting it was her special day and that I simply had to be part of it, financially. But I had drawn the line. I told her no. Now, there she was, sending me a message that felt more like an ambush than an olive branch. Dad, can we meet? I want to talk and fix things. The words twisted in my gut. Fix what? Was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation? Or another maneuver in her endless game of emotional blackmail? I stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard, weighing my options. The silence had been deafening, and now this sudden outreach felt like a trap. I thought about the past weeks, the terse conversations, the veiled threats, the guilt trips masked as concern. I had always tried to be a good father, but this wedding was different. It wasn't about family anymore. It was about entitlement and excess. I responded cautiously, where and when. Her reply was almost immediate. The bistro on 5th, 7 p.m. Please. I sighed, feeling the knot in my chest tighten. I remembered the last time we spoke, Emma's voice sharp, laced with disappointment and anger as she slammed the phone down after I refused to fund the designer gowns, the luxury venue, the endless list of extravagances she demanded. She said I didn't support her dreams, that I was selfish and cold. But how could I support a fantasy that wasn't grounded in reality? That night, as I got ready, the doubt gnawed at me. Was I making a mistake? Was I about to walk into a confrontation I wasn't prepared for? But the father in me wanted to believe this meeting might be the first step toward healing. When I arrived at the bistro on 5th, the warm glow of the restaurant's sign flickered against the cold night. I scanned the interior, searching for Emma among the soft chatter and clinking glasses. But she wasn't there. Instead, I was met by her fiancé, Mark, and a tall woman I didn't recognize, someone who introduced herself as a mediator. Their expressions were serious, almost businesslike. We're glad you came, Mark said, extending a hand I barely shook. Emma wanted me to make sure we talked. The mediator stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. We're here to discuss the wedding arrangements and the financial support required. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't what I expected. Emma isn't here? I asked, confusion creeping into my voice. She's tied up with work, Mark replied smoothly. But we wanted to be clear about what's needed. The mediator pulled out a folder thick with papers. We've outlined the expenses and the contributions expected. We need your commitment, or this family relationship will be at risk. I blinked, stunned. Threats already? The conversation shifted from a tentative attempt at reconciliation to an ultimatum. I'm willing to support Emma within reason, I said carefully, but this kind of financial demand is unreasonable. Mark's smile was thin, almost predatory. Reasonable is subjective, sir. Emma's expectations are clear, and if you don't meet them, she'll have to reconsider her ties. The mediator nodded. We want to avoid any estrangement, but the conditions are firm. I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. This was no longer about family or love. It was a business transaction with a side of manipulation. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. I love Emma. I want her to have a beautiful wedding, but not at the cost of my financial ruin or my dignity. Mark's eyes narrowed. Then perhaps you need to reconsider what kind of father you want to be. The words hung in the air like a challenge. I clenched my fists under the table, remembering the girl Emma used to be, the one who dreamed of a simple ceremony, who cared about love more than luxury. Somewhere along the way, that girl had been replaced by this demanding stranger. I realized then that this meeting was not about fixing things. It was about forcing my hand. I wasn't just being asked for money. I was being coerced into surrendering to a lifestyle I couldn't support. I looked at the mediator, trying to find a spark of reason. Is this really what Emma wants? Or is this someone else speaking through her? They exchanged glances but said nothing. I stood up slowly, the chair scraping against the floor. Tell Emma I'm willing to talk, but not on these terms. Mark's expression hardened. We'll be in touch. As I left the bistro, the cold night air hit me like a slap. I felt the weight of the silence that had preceded this moment, the silence that had been filled with unspoken threats and shattered trust. I called Emma once more on the way home, but she didn't answer. Her voicemail greeted me with a clipped message, leave your message. I hesitated, then spoke softly, Emma, it's Dad. I want to fix this, but not like this. Please, let's find a way that respects both of us. After hanging up, I sat in my car a while longer, staring out at the empty street. The road ahead was uncertain, and the daughter I thought I knew seemed further away than ever. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The next evening, I returned to the bistro on 5th, the same place where the previous meeting had left a bitter taste in my mouth. This time, I was prepared for whatever awaited me, though I wasn't sure if I was ready for the confrontation I sensed was coming. As I stepped inside, the warm light and soft murmur of other diners did little to calm the knot tightening in my chest. I scanned the room, and there she was, Emma. Not alone, but flanked by Mark and that same mediator from before. Her eyes met mine, a mixture of frustration and something I couldn't quite place. Was it desperation? Regret? I wasn't sure. "Dad," she said softly, standing as I approached. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Emma." Mark and the mediator remained seated at the table, their expressions unreadable but expectant. Emma gestured toward the empty chair beside her. "Please, sit. We need to talk." I sat, and the mediator immediately pulled out a folder, setting it between us. "We wanted to give you a clear picture," she began, her tone even but firm. "The wedding costs have been calculated, and we need to discuss your financial support." Emma looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Dad, I know we haven't been on the same page. But this wedding, it's important to me. I want you there, not just as a guest, but as the father who helped make it possible." Her words struck a chord, but I couldn't ignore the cold reality of the situation. "I understand it's important to you," I replied carefully. "But your fiancé and this mediator, you weren't here last time. Why is this negotiation so formal? Why isn't this between us?" Emma's face tightened. "Because it's not just between us anymore. Mark and I are planning our future together. This wedding is part of that future." The mediator opened the folder, sliding a sheet toward me. "Here are the expenses. The venue, the dress, catering, entertainment, the full list." I glanced over the numbers, and my heart sank. It was more than I expected, and clearly more than I could, or would provide. Mark leaned forward, his voice smooth but edged with something sharper. "We need your commitment. Without it, Emma might have to reconsider her engagement." The words landed like a blow. I looked at Emma, searching for a sign that she disagreed, that she was as uncomfortable with this as I was. But her expression was guarded, almost resigned. "I'm not making threats," Mark continued. "Just stating facts." I swallowed hard. This wasn't the reunion I hoped for. It was a negotiation with stakes I hadn't agreed to. "Emma," I said, voice low but firm. "I love you, but I can't fund this wedding on these terms. I'm willing to help, but not to the point of financial ruin or being coerced." Her eyes flashed with anger. "So you'd rather lose me?" "No," I said quickly. "I want you in my life, but not if it means sacrificing everything for a day of excess." Mark's smile was thin. "Your generosity, or lack thereof, will define your relationship with Emma moving forward." The mediator nodded. "We're simply asking for fairness." I looked at them both, the weight of their demands pressing down on me. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about control and expectations. "I won't be bullied into this," I said, standing up. "Tell Emma I'm willing to talk, but only if respect and honesty come first." Emma's face crumpled for a moment, then hardened again. "I don't know if that's possible anymore." I left the bistro with a heavy heart. The rift felt wider, the path forward uncertain. But I knew one thing. I couldn't be a pawn in this game. Not for Emma, not for anyone. Driving home that night, the city lights blurred past the windshield, but my mind was clear, focused on Emma and the widening chasm between us. I kept replaying the conversations, the veiled threats, the ultimatum cloaked as a family discussion. It was time to look back, not just at the present conflict, but at the years that had led us here. Emma wasn't always like this. I remembered her as a bright-eyed child, full of dreams and laughter, the kind of daughter who found joy in simple things, a picnic in the park, a handmade birthday card, a walk through the neighborhood. But somewhere along the way, those innocent delights had been replaced by demands and expectations I barely recognized. Her mother, my ex-wife, had always been indulgent, pampering Emma with gifts and praise that bordered on spoiling. I tried to balance that with lessons about responsibility and gratitude, hoping to ground her in values that would serve her well. But the influence of constant indulgence had taken root, growing into an unrelenting sense of entitlement. I thought back to the moment I drew the line on the wedding expenses. It wasn't a sudden decision. It was the culmination of years watching Emma's expectations spiral beyond what was reasonable. When she first talked about the wedding, it was a simple affair, friends, family, a modest venue. But each time we discussed it, the list grew longer, the price tag higher. Designer dresses, exotic flowers, luxury cars, a five-star venue. I tried to explain our financial limits, but it was like talking to a wall. The final straw came when she insisted on a $70,000 budget, ignoring our concerns and warnings. That's when I said no. Not because I didn't love her, but because I refused to enable what felt like reckless extravagance. I realized that Emma's sense of self had become entangled with this lifestyle, that the wedding was less about love and more about status and appearances. It was a painful revelation, but necessary. I also saw how Mark fit into this picture, a partner who seemed less concerned with Emma's happiness and more focused on the benefits her family's money could bring. Their partnership felt like a business arrangement disguised as romance, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Emma was being manipulated. Sitting alone that evening, I confronted an uncomfortable truth. I had been too lenient in some ways, hoping that love alone would guide her. But love wasn't enough when it came to setting boundaries and teaching responsibility. The realization stung. Had I failed as a father? Had my attempts to provide and protect inadvertently enabled this sense of entitlement? I knew I had to change my approach. Firmness, honesty, and clear boundaries were now necessary, not just for Emma's sake, but for my own. I pulled out a photo from my wallet, a picture of Emma as a child, smiling with a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked herself. That girl still existed somewhere beneath the layers of expectation and pressure. I vowed to find her again, to reach her beyond the demands and ultimatums. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about the future of our relationship, and whether the daughter I loved was still the one I knew. I knew I couldn't face this alone. The confrontation with Emma and Mark had left me shaken, but it also ignited a determination to uncover the truth beneath the veneer of their demands. Was Mark truly the man I hoped Emma had chosen, or was he exploiting her, and by extension, me? The next morning, I called my attorney, a steady voice of reason who had guided me through many family matters before. I explained the situation, the ultimatum, and the mounting expenses Emma insisted upon. She listened carefully, then advised, "We need to gather all the facts before making any decisions. If you suspect Mark's intentions, it's worth investigating." That afternoon, I quietly hired a private investigator. I needed to know who this man was beyond the charming smile and smooth words. The investigator was discreet, promising to uncover any relevant details without alerting Emma or Mark. Days later, the reports started coming in. Mark's background was far from the respectable image he projected. Multiple sources revealed a pattern. He had been involved in several relationships with women from affluent families, each ending with financial disputes and accusations of manipulation. One former partner had filed a restraining order, citing emotional and financial abuse. Another had claimed he pressured her into lavish spending beyond her means. Each piece of information painted a picture I hadn't wanted to face, that Mark might be using Emma to advance his own interests. I confronted my attorney with the findings. If this is true, I need to protect Emma and myself from being taken advantage of. She nodded gravely. We can prepare a plan to safeguard your assets and set clear boundaries. But you should also consider confronting Emma with what you've learned carefully. The idea of exposing Mark's history to Emma was daunting. Would she believe me, or see it as an attack? But I couldn't remain silent while she was potentially being manipulated. I spent the next few days gathering everything, the reports, documentation, and a timeline of events. I wanted to be ready for the next meeting, equipped with facts rather than emotions. Throughout it all, I wrestled with conflicting feelings: love for my daughter, disappointment in her choices, and fear for her future. But there was also a flicker of hope. If I could present this evidence calmly, maybe Emma would see the truth. Maybe we could start rebuilding trust. The investigation had opened my eyes to a reality I had ignored for too long. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about the people surrounding Emma and the influence they had over her. With a sense of resolve, I prepared to face the next chapter of this fraught journey, determined to protect my daughter and myself from the consequences of misplaced trust. The day of the next meeting arrived, and I walked into the same restaurant with a mix of apprehension and determination. Emma, Mark, and the mediator were already seated, their faces a blend of expectation and guarded confidence. I took a deep breath and joined them at the table, the folder of evidence hidden discreetly in my briefcase. Emma greeted me with a tentative smile, but there was an undercurrent of tension I couldn't ignore. Mark's eyes flicked toward me, sharp and calculating, as if sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The mediator opened the discussion as usual, outlining the wedding expenses and the need for financial support. But this time, I was ready. "Before we proceed," I said, keeping my voice calm. There's something important I need to share. I placed the folder on the table and slid it toward Emma. I've done some research on Mark's background. Her eyes widened, and I could see a flicker of confusion and defensiveness. Mark's jaw tightened. I opened the folder, revealing documents, reports, and testimonials detailing Mark's past, relationships marred by financial disputes, accusations of manipulation, and even legal actions taken against him. Emma's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. This can't be true. I looked her in the eye. I wanted you to know the truth, Emma. You deserve to make decisions based on facts, not illusions. Mark leaned forward, his voice low but forceful. This is an invasion of privacy and slander. You have no right to bring this here. The mediator tried to mediate the rising tension, but the atmosphere had shifted irreversibly. Emma's gaze dropped to the table, struggling to process the information. The realization was dawning. Mark's motives might not be as pure as she believed. I reached out gently. I'm not here to attack you or your choices. I want to protect you from making a mistake that could hurt you deeply. The room fell silent, the weight of the revelations pressing down on us all. Emma finally looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. I need time to think. I nodded, understanding the turmoil she must be feeling. Take all the time you need. But please know, I'm here for you. As we left the restaurant, the fractures in our relationship felt deeper, but so did a flicker of hope that honesty might be the first step toward healing. I sat alone in my study, the weight of the evening pressing down on my shoulders. The confrontation had been intense, raw with emotion, but I felt a strange calm settling over me. I had laid the truth on the table, exposing the shadows lurking behind the glossy surface of Emma's wedding plans. Now, it was up to her to decide how to move forward. I knew one thing for sure. I would not fund this wedding under false pretenses, nor would I allow myself to be manipulated into supporting a lifestyle that wasn't grounded in honesty and respect. My love for Emma was unwavering, but love alone couldn't justify enabling behavior that threatened to consume us both. I drafted a message to Emma, choosing my words with care. Emma, I want you to have a beautiful wedding, but it must be built on truth, respect, and mutual understanding. I'm here to support you, but only if we can be honest with each other. Let's find a way forward that honors both of us. I hit send, hoping the message would reach the daughter I knew beneath the layers of tension and expectation. Over the next few days, I set boundaries with myself and with Emma. I made it clear that financial support would be reasonable and controlled, tied to transparency and open communication. I wasn't just protecting my wallet. I was protecting our relationship, fragile as it was. I also reached out to my attorney to formalize these boundaries legally, ensuring that any contributions I made would be documented and conditional. It was a difficult step, but necessary to prevent future misunderstandings and potential exploitation. At the same time, I remained open to dialogue, willing to listen and understand Emma's perspective without judgment. I hoped she would see that my stance wasn't about withholding love, but about demanding respect and honesty. When Emma finally responded, her tone was softer, more reflective. She acknowledged the information I had shared and expressed a willingness to reconsider her plans and the people around her. We agreed to meet again, this time without mediators or ultimatums, just two people trying to rebuild trust. As I prepared for that meeting, I felt a cautious hope. Love sometimes required tough decisions, I realized, but it also needed boundaries to thrive. I was ready to walk that path with Emma, step by step, holding firm to my principles while opening my heart to the possibility of healing. Walking away from the restaurant that night, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. The confrontation had peeled back layers of illusion, exposing truths that were painful but necessary. Emma's stunned silence as she read through the evidence, Mark's faltering confidence, and the mediator's awkward attempts to regain control, all of it marked a turning point. I realized then that love wasn't always about saying yes. Sometimes, it meant standing firm, even when it hurt. I had drawn my boundaries clearly. No more blind financial support. No more manipulation disguised as family loyalty. Emma needed to understand that respect and honesty were the foundation of any relationship worth preserving. As I got into my car, I felt the weight of years pressing down, memories of a daughter who once found joy in the simplest things. That girl seemed distant now, replaced by someone shaped by others' ambitions and desires. But I refused to give up on her. I reached for my phone and dialed Emma's number. When she answered, her voice was tentative, almost uncertain. "Emma," I said softly, I want you to know that my love for you hasn't changed, but I need us to find a way to rebuild based on truth and respect." She was silent for a moment, then whispered, "I'm scared, Dad. I don't know if I'm ready." "I understand," I replied, "but I'll be here whenever you're ready." Leaving the restaurant behind, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, not because the battle was over, but because I had taken the first step toward protecting what mattered most. My legacy wasn't the extravagant wedding or the image Emma wanted to project. It was the bond we shared, fragile but real. As I drove into the night, I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to walk it, not as a man defeated, but as a father determined to protect his family from illusions, from greed, and from losing sight of what truly mattered. If you love the story, like the video and subscribe.